Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Building a Foundation for Transformative Self-Service, brought to you by Technology Services Industry Association and sponsored by Coveo. My name is Ingrid Triago, your moderator for today. Before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items. To maximize your webinar experience, click the question icon in the upper right corner of the registration to check your system's most recent versions of browsers and Flash Player. Update the most recent version available for the optimal viewing experience. Audio will be delivered via streaming. You will be in listen-only mode and you'll need to listen via computer or mobile device. Webinar controls, including volume, are found below the presenter headshot area. To view your webinar, select your link to proceed to the player. And you can ask questions at any time by sending your questions via the Ask a Question box on the left side of the webinar player. Feel free to enlarge your slides to full screen at any time by selecting the Full Screen button, which will appear on the top right area of the slide area. There will be an exit survey at the end of today's webinar. Please provide your feedback on the content and experience by filling out the brief survey. And finally, a link to the recorded version of today's live webinar and access to download the PDF of the presentation will be sent out within the next 24 hours via email. Once again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. You can follow TSIA on Twitter at TSIA Community and use hashtag TSIA Webinar to contribute to today's conversation. I would now like to introduce our presenters today, Judith Platz, VP Research Support Services for TSIA, and Jennifer MacIntosh, Vice President Customer Success for Coveo. As with all of our TSIA webinars, we do have a lot of exciting content to cover in the next 45 minutes, so let's jump right in and get started. Judy, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Inga. And Jen, always great to be with you, and thank you for sponsoring today's webinar. And thank you to everyone. Absolutely. And thank you to everybody who's joining us on the webinar. We know that your time is valuable, so we appreciate when you can make the time to be with us as we share our thoughts and views on self-service and, building a transformed self-service. So I thought what I would do before I turn it over to Jen is just do some highlighting of some key metrics that we look at TSIA. At TSIA, one of the features that our members have is the ability to log questions into the research team anytime they want, and we literally take thousands of inquiries every year. And on the screen right now, I'm showing you just a snapshot of the 2016, and it's important to kind of say where we were and what last year looked like as well. And in 2016, you can see it's some of the pretty traditional things that we would expect support service members to be asking about, things like customer satisfaction, KPIs, knowledge management. And what you see here in the middle are the two around self-service. Number one right here, top trends for self-service, and then immediately next to that, measuring the ROI of self-service. So in 2016, it was an important topic. It made the top 10. But when we move forward to 2017, something very interesting starts to happen, and something that I'm personally very thrilled to see. The questions around self-service, as I'm highlighting here, top trends for self-service became our number one question that members were asking. Measuring ROI for self-service, still in the top 10, but it's down there in that 10th position. And this is really encouraging for me because it says even though the ROI is important and we want to get to an ROI when we implement self-service, members are more concerned about what should I be doing with self-service? What are others doing? What does a good site look like? What are the features and key things that I need to have in there? So this was so great to see when we closed out 2017. Another feature that TSIA members have is the ability to benchmark with us. That takes, in a support service organization, 9 distinct modules, and you can look at your performance across those 9 modules. And here on the screen, what you're looking at are each dot is reflective of a company or companies, and they're benchmarking with us and where they are. And one of the things we're always doing with this data is looking at what's moving people over here into this pacesetter category. Do they have good practices? Do they not have enough practices? Do they not have good enough performance on some of the practices that they have? So when I'm doing a lot of that correlation, I'm looking for trends as my members are benchmarking, and I want to share some trends with you now. And Jen, I know some of this data I've shared with you, but some of this may be new as well. But one of the things that we looked at is for member companies that have strong self-service in place, and by strong, I mean they have high success rates for customers finding what they're looking for. They have high deflection rates because customers are able to completely deflect a case using self-service. And then, of course, looking at things like the satisfaction of the self-service site. So when I say strong self-service, it's a combination of those things. One of them that jumps out here is employee satisfaction. So employees that work for an organization who have strong self-service in place are significantly more satisfied with their role in the company and with their job overall. On the right-hand side, and this one is a little startling when you look at it, strong self-service, the employee attrition rate is about 12%. Weak self-service, it's 21%. And that's pretty standard if you think about it when we know one of the reasons employees leave companies is because they're doing monotonous, mundane, repetitive tasks. So right there, those two alone for just the employee piece, it's pretty significant for strong self-service. The next one that I looked at was the self-service satisfaction. And again, what does the satisfaction rate look like when self-service is strong? What does it look like when it's weak? Both of these are based on a 5-point scale. And on the right-hand side, we're looking at overall support satisfaction. Again, strong self-service, 4.7 on a 5-point scale. Weak self-service, 4.1. And we know how hard it is to move that needle, those points following that decimal point. So, you know, for anybody still thinking about how to implement self-service, we're going to talk about that today. But just seeing some of this impact, I think, speaks volume. The next set of data correlations that are impactful are right here with the company revenue growth and the support revenue growth. And people might say, Judy, that's a reach. Really? Does self-service really contribute to our company's revenue, to our support revenue? I would say yes, absolutely, because this is one of the strongest features that a support organization can put out for their customers. And here again, you can see the numbers for strong versus weak. And one of my last data points right here is around the cost per incident and the impact. So when you have strong self-service, you know that your cost per case, your cost per incident should be going down significantly. Here I'm looking at combined cost. So across all channels of engagement. And what does the cost look like? And you can see $189 per incident versus $232 when self-service is there. This next slide, we do this channel preference survey every year. John Ragsdale conducts this, and this year he and I partnered together on this. And this is where we go out not only to our members, but to the general industry, and we ask a question, a series of questions. But one of the main questions is, when you encounter an issue, how do you prefer to seek support for that issue? And I know it's a little bit of an eye test, but you're looking at the 2017 data, and then you're looking at the 2018 data in the lighter blue. And something I want to draw your eye to, self-service had significant growth coming into 2018. And not only did self-service, but self-service features, which generally you'll see chat coming off of self-service. Communities are part of self-service. The other thing to look at here is email and phone. Email is in the last place as far as where customers choose to go. And yet email still is a channel today that a lot of companies provide, and they think it's a preferred channel. And one of the recommendations we certainly make is don't be afraid to ask your customers the same types of questions around their preferences, because generally they're always happy to tell you. So, Jen, before I turn it over to you, I thought I would do something here, which is around my state of support paper. And one of the things I talked about this year were the 9 letters to remember as we came into 2018 and focused on 2018. And even though in my State of Support paper I wrote about each of these letters independently, it struck me when we were getting ready for this webcast how each and every one of these letters around Transform actually applies specifically to self-service as well. It's about the tools and the automation. It's about having self-service strong enough that when you do need to have the real-time engagement with your customer, you're able to and you're delivering that value. The fact that you can run your analytics on your self-service and understand what is happening, what are the customers doing, what is their journey. So obviously these are, important letters to me. I think important letters to all support executives today. But Jen, what I would love to do is, with that little introduction, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can start telling us your key points for today.
Thanks, Judy. It's great to hear kind of where the industry is coming as somebody who has been practicing self-service practices. As I consider myself, pretty much a lifelong practitioner of this space. I love to see that, the data is finally getting there across the entire industry and the spectrum. So thanks for having me today. I'm really looking forward to talking about some of the opportunities that exist for really building that transformation as you embark on it. Maybe you've already built one and you're having to rebuild it. So today we're going to spend some time talking about, well, what does that transformation look like? And what I'd like to start with is, we are also seeing a big change for 2018. And how I like to talk about it is really that, self-service is really no longer just about your website. So if you've been thinking about self-service in terms of your website, that was probably applicable in the early 2000s. But now, with the opportunity, with all of these different channels, and as you saw in Judy's report, it really aligns nicely to what I'm saying here in terms of, we're seeing the same sort of behaviors taking place within our community as well. So there's websites, there's communities, there's commerce portals, there's support portals, there's contact centers, there's all kinds of touch points for your customers as they're all looking at digital transformations, right? This is a big word we're hearing a lot about, and we look at it to say, how do we create relevance at scale for those digital transformations? And for us at Coveo, what we believe that is important to have a successful transformation like that and to develop this relevance at scale is really a solid foundation. So how do you create a solid foundation across all of those touch points? And it really starts with the ability to unify your content. And that's one of the things that Coveo is probably most famous for, is our ability to go deep and wide into your organization and get content no matter where it exists. So if it's, we have productized connectors for many of the technology brand solutions that are on the market today, and many for those that are even not there today. And so we take that and go and get that content and bring it back into the interface of your choice and one of those touch points. And so where we're really starting to see some exciting changes is around how machine learning and AI has really influenced this, right? We've got all these signals to help us understand what customers are doing, understanding their behaviors, which are driving analytics. And so from those analytics and understanding that data, the machine learning helps us create a real personalized experience for customers, employees, partners, whatever it may be. So I'll take that and take that into a real live application for you. One of our customers, Adobe, has really done a great job at creating that relevance at scale for their customers and agents. And so what we'll look at here is they have 3 different touch points or channels that they're leveraging their self-service experience. So certainly one is their website, but they've also taken that same self-service experience and embedded it in a product. For me as a practitioner in this space, I've been dreaming about this for the last decade, and to see customers actually starting to do this and starting to understand how important it is, and for for the overall customer experience and digital transformation, it's super exciting. And at the same time, they're also bringing this into the agent console. That same experience, the search experience for accessing content across those repositories is also being opened and used by support agents. So if you happen to be an Adobe Creative Cloud user and you are using Photoshop, you have access to a Coveo search right in Photoshop. And I think this is really where I see a lot of self-service going. People want to be able to do this. You want to engage with the customer and the user at the moment when they need the help or they need the service. In the old days, we'd have to go and leave our experience, so we're working on doing some sort of work here in Photoshop. We'd have to leave this, go over, find our login, find our password to the website, get inside, and have our self-service. Well, now where we're starting to see transitions here and these digital transformations is organizations are bringing that same experience right to you, right in the product, right where you need it. And so there's the opportunity to go across all of those products, and then if you did go to the website, let's say we talk about the multiple different use cases here. So let's say you're not in the product and you want to go, well, that same experience of artificial intelligence and machine learning can be used or seen directly on the website. So what I'm showing here is an example if you are an Adobe customer and you use the word crop. So for example, we could use crop in lots of different ways as a very simplified search term for Adobe. And if you're an anonymous web user, this is kind of the experience that you would expect to get back. However, if you were that same user and you were logged in and you had an experience, this is really where we start to see the personalization. We're able to personalize that experience for this particular user because they are a Photoshop user, and so we know that the likelihood of them wanting to crop something in PDFs is much less than it would be in Photoshop. And so this is how we start to see some of the transformations that folks are making in this digital world. For Adobe, what this is translated into is 2 times the number of searches on their website and in product, reducing the customer effort by having 3 times the decrease in no search results. So this is giving us the indicators and we're able to do the insights and understanding of what people are looking for. So a lot of people, believe it or not, are searching on your website and you don't have content for it. A lot of people don't even know that there's terms and things that are happening on their or activities that are happening on their site that they have no content for. And then finally, they've had really great click-through results and shown 41% of their content and the searches are getting click-through, which is exciting. So as we think about, well, how do you get some of this? How do you start on this road where Adobe has, and why is it so hard? So, many of you may have tried this or have been down this road one or many times. It's hard because it's important to think about it in a much bigger picture, right? Let's start to really understand what is the customer experience we're trying to create. What is the experience we want to create for our customers? And as you start to think about that, what you understand is that content is everywhere. There's no one single knowledge base or knowledge repository or database or location for all of the content. So content is everywhere, and creating a unified access to it. Most people don't have a unified access to that content. Bringing that back into a single interface. You're probably measuring the wrong things if you're measuring anything at all. So we've got metrics that we have to deal with and legacy around things that we've been measuring for a very long time in our support world. And then there's really a lack of customer behaviors. What are customers doing on our site? I mentioned that before. What are the gaps that customers may have? That's another area, another reason that makes this so hard. And then finally, if we're thinking of the search engines of past, those have been very complex and very time-consuming, and I've been there for many years in managing those experiences. Well, having said that, there's opportunities, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we can move forward there. One of the things that, again, going back to my opening statement around how self-service is really taking many forms or changing, or much more than just your simple corporate or support website. If you look at here's the different experiences that you may have. Public experiences, you may have these experiences that you want to have for your internal staff. What about your partners? I mean, there's many different ways that this can take place. So let's talk about how do you get started? What does it look like to build that formation or that foundation, for that transformation or that transformative services. So we're going to take a deeper look at each one of these 5 elements and give you some of my experiences that I've had in actually being a practitioner and delivering on this. So the first one for me, and this one continues to baffle me, that folks don't have a plan for their content. You must have a plan for your content, folks. Whether that's, I personally have been a practitioner of the KCS methodology for 15 years. I've deployed it in many different companies. And, I'm not saying you have to use KCS, but you certainly have to have a plan for your content and your knowledge. How is that content being used? The idea that content is created as a byproduct of solving problems is the right model here. You want to also make sure that you're evolving that content based on demand and usage, so you're not spending a lot of time working on content that's never going to be read or looked at or used. And collectively, I think we would all agree that together we all know more. You have different experiences and backgrounds than I do. Judy has a different background. Together, Judy and I know more than each one of us individually. And so we also want to talk about how do we change our methodologies around measurement. This is the biggest one. Many people are still measuring the wrong things, and we'll take a deeper dive here and talk about some of the changes in actually what we need to measure as we move forward with this transformation. The second thing that I think is really important is, again, having access to that knowledge, right? This creates the efficiency. If I have to go to 4 different places to look for 4 different types of content, my defects are in one place, my enhancement requests are in another, the knowledge base is in one place, and support cases are another. Those are 4 easy things that our support engineers and support agents use on a daily basis. I've been one myself for many years in my career. I know that those things are very important. There's also many other things. So, having to go to all those multiple locations and look for content really creates an inefficiency in our support center operations. If we continue to come back to that whole conversation around metrics, when we look at the traditional metrics that we've been using to measure our businesses for the last 20 plus years, it really is time to start really rethinking that, right? These traditional measures of average handle time, first contact resolution, and cost per case, as it's just in that that channel, are really not going to help us get to that transformative, digital experience. So if you think back to Judy, I'm going to go back to your slide there. I just love that bar chart, even though it was tiny, to see that, email and phone were at the very, very bottom. Well, if you look at these traditional measures, those are largely tied to those 2 channels of service. So as we start to think about self-service and what we have to do differently, there's a huge opportunity for us to focus on those new measures and really look at things that matter now, right? This is resolved answers. So what percentage of your content, of your website, are you delivering answers to your customers? Are your customers having success when they attempt to self-serve, whether that be through your portal, through your product, wherever it may be? What about your support agents? Right? Understanding the known to new case ratio. And what I mean by that, what percentage of the cases that are coming into your support center that aren't being solved in self-service are new versus the ones that are known? If you don't have an answer for those and they're new, that makes sense why they would have to come in to the support center. And I think another important piece to tie back to Judy's presentation here is that this is where you get at that employee satisfaction. When we saw the folks who have the much greater employee satisfaction and lower attrition rates, I highly tie it back to this specifically, and understanding that support engineers do not want to solve password reset problems all day long. And so when they have a variety of activities creativity in their work, and they're being challenged to solve complex problems, and those password reset issues are being solved online by themselves, that makes for much happier employees that will stay with you longer. And so that's really how we see, the changes in employee and customer satisfaction as well. For us at Coveo, we talk a lot about relevance, and it really how the power of artificial intelligence can drive this machine learning and personalization. For years, we've been talking about content, and now we know that it's not just about content. It's about context, and that context is where am I going to engage with this content, and what am I trying to do? What are those behavioral analytics that are happening from what I'm doing? So you bring content, context, and intent together, and we really see that as what is driving the relevancy. We have loved this idea so much that we've built what we call the Coveo Relevancy Maturity Model. And this is a model that my team in the Customer Success Organization uses on a daily basis with our customers. Many of the customers who come to Coveo are somewhere down here on the bottom left-hand corner. They may not be all the way down into siloed search. They may have some sort of federated search happening in their organization, but they certainly don't have that unified experience across their entire content set, and they start with us. Well, we work with them on an ongoing basis to help them move them up and to the right. Everybody in every model you ever see wants to go up and to the right, and that's what my team does, working with you along the way. So we take that notion of AI and machine learning and really help you break that down to what does that mean for me as an organization? How are we going to apply that in my company, and how is that going to help my customers be more successful? Finally, learning from all of this behavior in your crowd really is what can help you drive those continuous improvements. And we here at Coveo have lots of different measures that we've put in place, which are some of these new measures around measuring self-service success that can help you understand what are your customers looking for. Are they finding content? Is there no results? Like we saw in the Adobe example, we were able to really drive that number down for them by helping them understand what people were looking for, and then they could then go and fill that content gaps. Again, this is a KCS principle around being demand-driven. The demand is coming from your customers. They're looking for this content that doesn't exist. The next is really, those other three metrics are really around how our search engine is performing. Looking at your content. How is your content performing? Are people clicking through it? What number of results? Are they having to go to the second or third page of your results to find an answer? All of those help us make decisions and drive actions and behavior on what do we do next. Going back to that relevancy maturity model, how do I take this data and turn it into actionable next steps for my organization? Here's a couple of screenshots that we thought would be helpful for helping you understand what exactly that content can look like, and what exactly we see when we dig into those content gap reports, and so that you have a really good understanding. And additionally, talking about looking at the bigger picture and how we're measuring this performance across the different interfaces. What we know is that how something is performing on your website may be different how it's performing on one of your other self-service touch points. We're able to separate that traffic and understand what's working well where, which is really exciting. And then finally, just a couple more slides to tie us up here. It wasn't just Adobe that's had these kind of great results. We've been able to work with lots of these large high-tech brands. Many of you know these names, and we're excited to be able to work with these and see to really drive the improvements that these organizations have seen in really delivering improved self-service experiences for their customers and employees. Finally, I'm going to be at the TSW in San Diego, along with lots of others, members of my team here at Coveo. We'd be really excited to take this conversation to the next level. I'm happy to book a meeting with you and sit down and talk about your specific experiences and how we may be able to help, or if you just want to grab a coffee and chat and pick my brain, I'm happy to do that too. I'm speaking with one of our customers, Salesforce, on Tuesday, May the 8th at 1 o'clock slot, and love to see you there. So, Inga, I'll turn it back over to you to see if we had any questions that may have come in throughout the session.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen and Judy, for an outstanding session today. I really loved all of the insight and all the data that was shared today. So thank you so much for another fantastic presentation. So we are coming to the Q&A portion of today's live webinar. If you have any questions for Judy or Jennifer, take this opportunity to ask those questions live via the Ask a Question box on the left side of the webinar player. So I'll hand it off to Judy. Judy, there was a question that you had for Jen, and then I'll just hand it off to you for that part of the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Inga. Jen, as you and I both know, working with the executives that we do, one of the questions that I see come through quite a bit is, I'm trying to rebuild, and we've talked about this in the past, the number of organizations that are on their second, third, fourth iteration of their self-service sites. If you could sum it up, what are the, top one, top two, top three things that you would tell somebody to start thinking about as they start transforming or rebuilding their self-service?
Okay. Great question, Judy. Love it. I think there's really three things that really kind of quickly pop to my mind. The first is that self-service is a product. And so a lot of people don't think of it as a product. And I've been a product manager for self-service products for many, many years. And you have to think about it. Would you launch a product that your company is selling or a service that your company is offering without letting people know, without having any sort of marketing campaign or go-to-market strategy around how you would engage? The answer is no, you wouldn't do that. But many times people have no marketing plans. They have no awareness campaigns. They have no education plans for how they're going to get their message out. What I like to tell people, this isn't Disneyland. They're not just going to come. You have to help understand. So that's number one. Really market this as a product. Second, surprisingly, people don't have processes for their content. Unfortunately, guys, it just doesn't fall out of thin air. You've got to have a process for managing your content and your knowledge. What does that look like? How do I get that there? This is above and beyond your product documentation. It's a great starting point. It's certainly a great contributor, but there is more. There is more that is happening that is demand-driven that you have to have a process for managing. Third thing, change management. When you go to implement any sort of services or changes in your organization, behavioral changes, we talked a lot about metrics and how we have to change metrics. The change management strategy has to be in place. You have to understand that what you're asking them to do yesterday is going to be different than what you're going to ask them to do tomorrow. So how is that change going to be reflected in your organization? Do you have plans for communication? Do you have plans for helping them understand what's in it for them? Why do they want to be included? What difference is it going to make to your support team, your support engineers, as they look to change? So those were the three things that I would highly recommend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen. And I can't stress enough the first part of that answer and marketing this as a product. And too many organizations today, support is support is support. And I still work with a large number of members who are not marketing their support brand at all. And they're building, like you said, they're expecting people to come, but not having that marketing backing of really saying not only is our self-service a product, but our entire support is a product. That is really super key. So I appreciate that answer. So Inga, I think we're having some other questions come in. Did you want to ask us those questions?
Sure, of course. And yes, we did get a couple of questions that came in. So one question that came in from the audience is, and this can be either for Judy or Jen, but from your experience, what roles or role in a company tend to drive this change? As it seems that support benefits substantially, but it does require commitment from product, education, marketing, and web teams.
Yeah, Judy, we can both probably have similar answers to this. I'm happy to take a stab at this. Having been one of these roles for many, many years in my career and continue to drive this change, I think that it is largely led from a customer experience, customer support type of advocacy. Those have been all the titles that I've had over my career where I have been the function that's doing this, but you're absolutely right. It does require huge marketing, if you will, internally to the product, the documentation, education groups, everyone to get joint alignment. So it is a very cross-functional role, but most often for me, my experience has been that I have worked inside of a support organization or, like I said, experience or advocacy, which have kind of wider reaching responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think, one of the things that we see really coming on strong in the industry is, having someone who actually owns knowledge at the corporate level. So call it a knowledge czar, if you will. John Ragsdale and I put out last year our knowledge management maturity model, and one of the things we said there was having a corporate culture around knowledge was so important, and ideally that's driven from the CEO level, and then a knowledge czar who's in place that is going to align all of these business units, because we have so many service disciplines today who are sitting on knowledge, but generally this has always been left to a support organization, but a knowledge czar can round up the right people from all of the service lines, education, professional services, customer success. They're very key in developing knowledge today. And, of course, getting development engaged and understanding the strength of self-service and what that does to the product. So certainly looking at, a knowledge czar is one of the key things that I would want to see companies have involved as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
Thank you, Judy. And this next question is for Jennifer. So Jennifer, for companies that haven't selected a platform like Coveo, where do you suggest we start our planning while we're figuring out if and when to purchase a system like Coveo?
Yeah, great question. I think what you want to start, the basics that I would say is like, what is the experience you want to create for your customers? Do you want to create an experience where they are serving themselves? And so with that is going to require technology, whether it's Coveo or any other technology. I mean, Coveo is certainly not the only technology that is required for that. Certainly a key piece, but not the only. So if that is really coming down to what is the experience you want to create, and I would journey map that experience, right? I would spend some time understanding all you have to do to help you kind of prioritize this, let's look at Judy's slide. It's what your customers are telling you they want. And so, they don't want to phone you. And it has nothing to do with their age, their demographic. It's just really, they don't want to have to phone you. And think about the experience you want to create and start to plan around that, obviously understanding that with creating a self-service experience, it is going to require an investment, and you start to get some budgeting, planning going, but really I would focus in on that experience you want to create.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
So this next question is for Judy. Judy, is there any information on TSIA regarding how to best market support and the channels to use to market?
That's a great question, Inga. Thank you for giving me that one. And yes, we absolutely have some of the best practices here, and we have research around, companies that have strong marketing and support, what that does to some of those key metrics that you saw up front. So for that individual who asked that question, I'd be happy to take that offline and share what TSIA does have there.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy. So I'm just scrolling through the questions and just looking at, there's one question that came in around a support web experience director. Judy and Jen, do you have any insight on that and how critical it is to have a role around support web experience director?
Rather than getting in on the title, I think let's talk a little bit about the responsibilities. Do I think it's critical to have someone at a senior level in your organization who has an everyday hat, who thinks about this every single day? Without a doubt. I've worn that hat many times, many years at a director level, starting out years ago. Absolutely, you need to have someone who thinks about this, that wakes up. This can't be something a support manager or someone who is running the support center operations, who's managing all of the agent and engineer activity does off the side of their desk. If you really want to do this well, you have to really invest in this, and it's really about the experience you're trying to create, and let me tell you, yes, it's a full-time job. Hope that answers.
Yeah, and Inga, I second that. And, one of the things we talk about a lot is the fact that, today's business-to-business users expect consumer support. And when we say that, they want that consumer experience, not just, in the various channels, but definitely with self-service. We want to know when we go to a site, do you know me? Do you know my preferences? Do you know what I own? Do you know the types of questions I ask? And that really takes a strong individual who can guide and understand and design for the different personas like Jen was talking about, and having that journey mapping, because self-service sites are not just about put it all out there and hope they can muddle through and find it. We really need to design for the experience. So I can't stress enough how important I think this role is.
Thank you so much, Judy and Jennifer, for answering that question. So we have another question that came in, and this can be either for Judy or Jen. How does the support organizational model need to change as self-service becomes more predominant?
Judy, I'm happy to take this one. Sure. I think that the biggest thing that I would say is, if you go back to a couple of the slides I talked about this, right? The change in metrics, right? When you start to change how people's performance is measured, all of a sudden you start to get traction. So when you talk about how does the support model need to change, it's really around how we're measuring people and how are we measuring their contribution to success. We need our support agents and our support engineers to be part of that larger picture, and so we need to start thinking about how are we going to engage them, and typically how we start to get people interested in conversation is about measures. It's also the hardest part, right? For people, we've been hanging on to these traditional measures, we've been looking at them, our boards looked at them, everybody looks at them, but they're not necessarily driving the right behaviors we want. So start with the measures and understanding, how do we create measures that drive the behaviors that we want, that support an overall customer experience that really drives a digital transformation. Judy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that one.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Jen. Perfect.
Great. And I think that we have time for one question before we close out for today, but this could be for Judy and Jen. In your experience, who usually manages KCS, support or learning development?
Well, go ahead, Judy.
Go ahead, Judy.
Okay. I see a wide mix, and I don't see it being traditionally what we would often call a turf war. It's more where it ends up landing. But I would say for a lot of my organizations, if I had to say we're slightly ahead, it does tend to be in support from what I see. But there is a good mix, and I think we've seen good results from members both ways. But I do certainly see more of support owning that KCS and managing the KCS.
So my answer might be just a slightly bit different, and this is really solely based on my own personal experience as well as with those from the Consortium of Service Innovation, where I've been a member for a long time. I would say that it's kind of it's kind of outside of support. It's kind of in this experience advocacy role that I talked about. That's where I see it most often. Does that really fall under? It can fall under either support or learning development, but largely, I agree with Judy, it's largely under support, but it's generally kind of on its own a little bit outside and kind of straddling a bunch of different places.
Thank you so much, Jen and Judy. So we are coming to the conclusion of today's live webinar. We did get a few more questions that came in, and any questions that we didn't get to during today's live session, we will definitely follow up with you after today's webinar. So just a couple of quick reminders before we close out for today that there will be an exit survey at the end of today's live webinar. Please take a couple of minutes to provide your feedback on the content and experience by filling out that brief survey. And finally, there will be a link to the recorded version of today's live session and access to download the PDF of the presentation that will go out within the next 24 hours via email. I'd like to take this time to thank everyone for joining us on today's webinar, Building a Foundation for Transformative Self-Service, brought to you by TSIA and sponsored by Coveo. My name is Inga Triago, your moderator for today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next TSA webinar very soon. Take care, everyone.